It was December 1971. Ian Cardozo, back then a major, was at the Defense Service Staff College. They knew the war is going to start, so the course was terminated a month in advance. All soldiers were told to drop their families home. Ian Cardozo was on his way to Delhi en route Agra to catch the flight when he heard Pakistani aircrafts that day on the 3rd of December when the war had started. When he reached Palam, he was informed that the flight was no longer operational as it had become a likely target filled with officers and soldiers. It was considered too risky. Without wasting time, he quickly got into a taxi and rushed to the Delhi railway station. The taxi driver, a Sikh gentleman, refused to take any fare from him. The taxi driver said, "No, Saab, how can I take money from you? You're going to defend the country." He arrived at a place called Dharamnagar, located in the northeastern part of India near the Bangladesh border. There, Ian Cardozo met a junior commissioned officer, JCO, of the Indian Army, who said, "Sir, the battalion is about to begin the operation, so we need to move quickly and reach on time." A jeep was arranged to take Cardozo across the border in East Pakistan, which is now known as Bangladesh. By the time Cardozo arrived, the first wave had already moved into Sylhet, a city in Bangladesh where the battle was underway. The officers were deeply concerned as the commanding officer had gone in with the first wave, but they couldn't send the remaining companies that night due to the lack of night flying capability. Major Cardozo, along with other troops, joined the final wave early in the morning once the flight operations were resumed. This was the Indian Army's first Heliborne operation. They landed with a small number of soldiers and immediately came under heavy fire. However, the Indian Air Force provided crucial support, keeping the enemy at bay. Despite their limited numbers, the troops carried out aggressive patrolling and continuously pursued the enemy. Their bold actions created the impression that they had a much larger force, which worked to their advantage. Still, the Indian side suffered severe casualties, as their strength was significantly smaller than that of the enemy. The operation lasted 9 days and 9 nights. The soldier had no proper food or water, only a handful of shakarpara. Now, shakarpara is an Indian sweet made from sugar, ghee, which is called the clarified butter, and semolina, which lasted just a day. So how did they survive? They drank water from muddy pools and gathered scattered grains from abandoned areas they had occupied. It was an extremely tough ordeal, especially since reinforcements never arrived. But they endured, relying on sheer grit and determination. At Sylhet, the Indian forces were heavily outnumbered by the Pakistani troops. Yet, Major Cardozo and his battalion stood firm, mounting a determined defense. The Gorkhas used psychological warfare so effectively that they created the illusion of a much larger Indian force. This strategy worked so well that the Pakistani commander eventually surrendered, despite having superior numbers. In an interview, Major Ian Cardozo mentioned that the BBC deserved credit too, because they reported that the Indian Army had deployed a large number of troops in Sylhet. So this misinformation reached the Pakistani side and played a key role in their decision to surrender. It turned out to be a brilliant move in strategic warfare by the Indian Army. After the successful capture of Sylhet, the Indian Army began efforts to secure and stabilize the area. Part of this involved clearing regions that might have been mined or booby-trapped by retreating Pakistani troops. While walking through one such area, Major Ian Cardozo accidentally stepped on a landmine. The explosion severely injured his right leg, completely destroying the lower part. Unfortunately, there was no immediate possibility of medical evacuation. The battalion's senior medical officer had already been killed in earlier combat, and their medical facility had been destroyed in a blast, leaving them without surgical tools or proper support for an amputation. Facing the threat of a severe blood infection and his condition worsening rapidly, Major Cardozo made a terrifying yet courageous decision. He took out his khukri. Khukri is a big knife the Gorkha Regiment of the Indian Army uses in the battle or in the war. It's the traditional Gorkha blade. So he took out his khukri, realizing his injured leg was beyond saving and that immediate action was necessary. He amputated his own leg without anesthesia, right there on the battlefield. According to some accounts, he first asked a fellow soldier, "Can you do it for me? If you can't, I will." So when the soldier hesitated, Major Cardozo took matters into his own hands and carried out the amputation himself. Later, with no medical assistance available on the Indian side, the news of his condition reached the Pakistani forces in East Bangladesh, who had already surrendered. In a remarkable act of humanity, they offered to help. A Pakistani army doctor, Major Mohammad Basir, provided the necessary medical care and carried out the amputation properly, ensuring Major Cardozo received the treatment he urgently needed. He was eventually evacuated and survived. A prosthetic leg was fitted later. Despite being disabled, he insisted on returning to full military duty. On his way back to evacuation, a Pakistani soldier, JCO, told Ian Cardozo, "Janab, हमारी फौज में भारत जैसे ऑफिसर्स होते तो हमें ये दिन सरेंडर का नहीं देखना पड़ता." So that means if we had officers like the Indian Army and the Pakistani Army, we would have not seen this disgraceful day of surrender. This powerful statement reflects how well led is the Indian Army. Major General Ian Anthony Joseph Cardozo was born on August 7th, 1937, in Bombay, now Mumbai. He studied at St. Xavier's School and College. In July 1954, he joined the Joint Services Wing, which later became the National Defense Academy, NDA. At the NDA, he was the first cadet to win the gold medal for being the best all-round cadet and the silver medal for standing first in order of merit. In 1958, he was commissioned into the 1st Battalion of the 5th Gorkha Rifles at the Indian Military Academy. In 1959, he became the first officer in the Indian Army to receive the Sena Medal for gallantry during a patrol in Nefa, that's Northeast Frontier Agency, a region that was later renamed Arunachal Pradesh. Major General Cardozo participated in several major conflicts, including the Sino-Indian War 1962, the Indo-Pakistani War 1965, and the Indo-Pakistani War 1971. In the 1971 Battle of Sylhet in Bangladesh, he was severely wounded and lost his leg, as we all know. Despite this, he continued to serve actively in the army. He became the first war disabled officer to command an infantry battalion. Over the years, he rose to the rank of Major General and became a symbol of courage and determination. He retired in 1993 as the Chief of Staff of a corps in the Northeast. After retirement, he served as the Vice President of the War Wounded Foundation and as a Chairman of the Rehabilitation Council of India, where he worked to support the rights and rehabilitation of people with disabilities. He remains an inspiring public speaker and advocate for inclusivity. Major General Cardozo is also an accomplished author, having written several well-regarded books such as Paramveer, Our Heroes in Battle, the sinking of INS Khukri, and Beyond Fear. His writings honor the bravery and sacrifice of unknown soldiers, combining historical facts with powerful storytelling. His life is widely regarded as an example of unwavering spirit and leadership in the face of adversity. He has been honored with several awards, including the Vishisht Seva Medal and the Sena Medal, recognizing his military services and his contribution after retirement. Now, let's dive down to the reasons for the war. The Battle of Sylhet occurred as part of the larger Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, which was itself triggered by the Bangladesh Liberation War. The immediate cause was the massive military crackdown by the Pakistani army in East Pakistan, which is now called the Bangladesh, starting in March 1971. Which led to widespread atrocities and the displacement of over 1 million refugees into India. This humanitarian crisis, along with ongoing genocide and instability, prompted the government of India to intervene militarily to stop the violence and enable refugees to return home. Strategically, Sylhet was targeted because it was a key defensive position for Pakistani forces in the northeast, and its capture would help isolate and neutralize Pakistani troops, preventing them from reinforcing other critical areas such as Dhaka. So, the Battle of Sylhet happened due to, we can say, a combination of humanitarian, strategic, and military reasons to halt the genocide, address the refugee crisis, and achieve key military objectives that would facilitate the liberation of Bangladesh.